Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see today, we're going to be talking about something a little eccentric that I'm calling the dream threshold theory. So I've been brewing up a new episode on dreams because I've been dreaming like crazy these past several months, and I mean, wow. Like the most incredibly real, continuous dreams I've had perhaps in my life. And what I mean by that is they're continuous and there's more continuity in them than in previous dreams that I can remember. Meaning, usually, every time you go through a door jam in a dream, you exit an environment into another environment. Your ability to keep that other environment that you were in stable, architecturally speaking, socially, who's in the room with you, it starts to rewrite itself. So that if you were to go through a door jam and then turn around and go back through it and expect to find what you were experiencing, personally for me, it's usually fairly inconsistent. That's why when you park your car in a dream and you go inside and you do something and you try to come back out and find it, there's always that frustration of where the hell's my car? And then when you can't find it because it's been written out of the script, your brain goes to the next assumption, which has been stolen. It's been towed away. Now, if you've watched my other episodes on dreaming, you'll know that I have a consistent question that I've been unable to answer to my satisfaction until recently. And that's what this episode's sort of driven by. And the question that's been haunting me forever is, why do we have to dream? And it was driven by one of my dad's army buddies who said when I was probably about somewhere between 11 and 12, he said, I think going to sleep is the biggest waste of time. And that's really, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're really excited about life, it is a pain in the butt. I'm sure that Steven Spielberg and all those people that have had high moments in their life where they're creating something with their time, they all feel exactly the same. But I think I might have an answer. Now, what's really funny about these questions is there are things that are right under our nose that we don't see because we don't have a different approach to it in our minds. And then somebody or something serendipitously tells us to think differently for a split second. And all of a sudden, we know that the emperor's not wearing any clothes, right? This is going to be one of those kind of episodes, hopefully. What do we generally think about when we think about dreaming? I think most of us realize you're asleep most of the time. Now, obviously, plenty of us daydream. But the real good stuff, boy, that's some good English for you. But the good stuff is all related to being in your REM sleep, your random eye movement phase. A dream specialist will tell you over and over that as soon as you hit delta sleep wave, you no longer dream. They're looking at your brain waves at Stanford Sleep Center. If that's the case, then I must very rarely ever get to a delta. Because, again, I have continuous dreams all night, meaning I will go to sleep, a dream will randomly begin, and then I dream, and then I wake up, I roll over, so I'm tired on one side, and then I go back to sleep, and the dream continues. And it might restart to be a different location or whatever, but that continues pretty much until I wake up in the morning. I don't know how that continues continuously for me, but then again, I don't think I've ever slept like most people sleep. I get shitty sleep. But dreaming is sleeping. And sleeping is because we get tired, don't we? Why do we get tired? I mean, seriously. You can explain it to yourself of like, well, of course, you've been up and you've been working, and of course, you need to rest. Because we all feel this cycle every single day. However, when you go to sleep, your body's 100%. If it were to be 98%, you'd probably die, right? Well, I'm going to skip a few heartbeats. I'm going to not send, immune system messages around the body. We're just going to we're going to take a day off on this autonomic system, right? Nope. Your body keeps going. 100%. And then if you really experiment with your consciousness and being tired, and you're a person like me who's done several 36 to 48-hour days, which a lot of folks do a lot more than that, like truckers and stuff and soldiers. When you lay your head down, you are experiencing a very detailed version of being tired. You ever been so damn tired you can't get to sleep? And you're just sitting there almost swimming in your bed, What I have found when I get to a 36-hour moment is when I put my head down on the pillow, I feel what I believe to be my soul falling further. So if I lay, horizontal on a bed, I lay my head, as soon as my head hits the pillow, I feel my consciousness continue to fall. And then for whatever reason, my body recaptures it, it falls, it recaptures it, it falls. It's like my body's saying, don't lose connection with the SOUL, But isn't it interesting that if you lay down in a bed, you ever had this happen? I'm sure anyone over 30 has had this happen. You lay down and you have not moved. And you spent the majority of 8 hours laying down in bed and breathing slowly and not exerting your muscles. And you're really not thinking of much. Yeah, a little daydream here, a little daydream there, but you're not falling asleep. You never lose consciousness completely, and therefore you never dream. And then you get up and you feel like you haven't slept. But you went through the motions. And then, of course, if someone says, well, how do you feel? You'd be like, man, I didn't sleep last night. You didn't sleep? No. Well, what were you doing? Well, I went into bed. I laid down. I didn't move, but I didn't go to sleep. I didn't dream. I didn't have anything happen. I didn't lose consciousness, basically. But we don't really track the fact that that is what sleep really is losing consciousness. So what is losing consciousness? Outside getting knocked in the head and passing out, but what is losing consciousness? Think about the phrase, you lost your consciousness. Where did it go? Well, if you're asleep, it went off to dreamland. Whether or not you remember the dreams or not, I hope that everyone has one. But your body must let go of your soul for you to feel sleep. And I'm just going to use soul and consciousness interchanged freely. I'm considering them synonyms of each other. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating? We all know that we get tired. Okay, now I could be up all night and use my hand for 4 days straight. Typing, painting, building something. But I don't ever feel like my hand is tired, right? I don't, if you stand up all day at a trade show or something, you go to Disneyland from 8 in the morning till 2 in the morning, your feet will hurt. They're not necessarily tired, they're just hurt. You can stress your muscles out. You stress your thighs out, and then they don't want to function. And so you think of sort of like, well, I need to give my muscles a chance to rest, to reconstitute. You're sore for 2 days. The second day is the worst. But you're not necessarily saying that your muscles are tired, right? What's going on is you've torn the muscle and it needs to heal. And that's why, it builds up over time, right? Now I'm going to hit you with a bunch of ideas in this episode here, but here's the key kicker, okay? Now we know that being in this world, it seems to be very regimented and it's extremely detailed. right? When you go into the dream world, it's very free-flowing and almost a caricature of reality. And anything can happen. And I mean anything can happen. It does seem to be limited by your ability to imagine what could happen in some cases. Although, I know we've all had dreams where you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. There's psychologists that would say that, your subconscious dreams up a bunch of stuff on its own, and then you're essentially taking back doors to see, what's behind the scenes, like the coming soon stuff, right? And I'll liken it to that moment when you find out a sequel was made to a movie that you loved. Usually the sequel has a little bit more of a punch to it than the original film, but you see a movie trailer and you cannot believe that the right thing happened. Recently, I just discovered that Super Troopers from 1999, I believe, or 2000, was just sequeled. And I'm very excited because that first movie was great. And then I watched the trailer and it's all the original cast members. Amazing. I don't know if the blonde cop girl is in there, but the main crew is there from the police precinct of the original one. And it feels great. But now, one form of reality, this one, you get tired. And in the other one, you're living that other reality and you're resting. Isn't that wild? This is a reality that makes you tired, and that's a reality that makes you feel rejuvenated. Now, how many times in this reality have we had something we had to really pay close attention to, and it made you exhausted, right? You're doing some homework. You're driving in bad conditions, right? Some winter driving. And man, you got to hang on that steering wheel. You got to pay attention to what's over the hood of your car. You might die. You got to really pay attention. You're in a conference with somebody and you are having to pay attention to every word you say. You get exhausted, right? And then there are some things you can do in this world that make you feel so relaxed. And you still have to experience it. Maybe you're floating on a noodle in a lake like Lake Havasu. It's 114 out there, but it's a dry heat. You got your favorite drink in your hand. Everyone's just chilling on a noodle or a blow-up chair or whatever. You're in a pool, and you're totally relaxing. You're at some resort. The water's calming your frequency down. You're still doing something, but you're relaxing. So the reason why that happens in this reality is due to the amount of calories of energy and thought cycles that are going through your mind to do the complex one. When we're chilling out in Hawaii in some lagoon, sipping on some pineapple rum drink, you're not doing much. You're relaxing, right? But what are we taught about the difference between this experience and the dreaming experience? We're taught this one is quote unquote real, man. And the other one is a dream. It's fake. It's a facsimile. I mean, we know that if you, one of the glorious things about people who have been injured, okay, if there is anything glorious about their reality, you lose a limb, you can't walk anymore, but you did, and maybe you could see, but you're blind now. You're whatever. I have heard plenty of reports that say that folks have reported, well, I love dreaming. And they say, why? And it's because I can walk again. I can dance. I can use my hands figuratively in my dream. I can hold someone. I'm free. I can fly. Interesting, right? The thing is if I were to say this is a real reality and the other one's a fake reality, there's still a common denominator word in there. And I know I'm being selective in the words, but if words were symbols of meaning, then the meanings are always going to be in the description of those two hemispheres, right? You could mix up the words, but at some point there's a symbol that means reality, whether you call it real or fake. This is a reality, and dreams are a reality. So they're kind of the same thing, right? If you have oil paint and you have acrylic paint, it's still paint. It's just achieved through different means. Something that creates hopefully a relatively permanent mark when applied to a surface. This one is super detailed, and usually in life, things that are super detailed that you do are exhausting because it takes more effort to do something that's more detailed. Now, you could be, slightly more excited by it because it's creating a dopamine drop in your body, it's creating an endorphin drop in your body, and that'll make you feel high. So it sort of counteracts the pain of some incredibly meticulous thing you might be doing. Maybe you carve something, maybe you paint, maybe you're drawing with a really fine pen, maybe you're doing some body maneuver that's requires a lot of attention, ballroom dancing or something. You're driving a car 200 miles an hour around in a loop. But in the dream state, it's nice because it almost seems like, most of us dream lying down. And what's interesting about it is usually you have some form of comfort when you're achieving sleep. You're warm in the outside world. And so when you're in your dreams, you're sort of floating around your dream, whether you believe you're walking or not or driving. You're really not paying much attention to your feet. They don't really exist. Right? You never get sore feet in a dream. You don't. Because your body really doesn't exist. Once we created video games where we could fly a camera around a reality, it was probably the most dream-like facsimile of dreams. Because you just got a camera and you can walk around. Now we have virtual reality that even makes it more like a dream. When you put those goggles on, you're not necessarily walking anywhere, especially if you use half the programs that are out there. You have to zap the ground in front of you and then your body teleports because they really can't make you walk because the technology kind of sucks. Here's what I'm going to suggest to you. They're the same thing. They're the same thing. Reality is reality no matter how you splice it. And this is going to open up sort of a Pandora's box for us, the deep thinkers, to contemplate how far could this go. Now, I just completed another show about, Are We God?, where I describe a lot of my other existential thoughts in other videos. So we're going to go with, again, that your true consciousness, however it really occurs, we're not quite sure, but it is your soul. It is your mathematical cloud that is you. It has a sort of a neuron artery back to all the other neurons in the universe. And through that collection of sort of, AI tree, some neural net, it can access all information in the universe as long as you can build the query. Meaning, if some alien lived on some red planet a long time ago and you never knew that existed, unless you literally randomly throw darts in your brain to create a query. Okay, red alien has a blue dog and lives on a tiny planet the size of Earth vegetable pea. You're not going to find that information out because you don't know that it exists. But if you look back on yourself and you eat Indian food and you're like, oh my God, I'm having that memory again. Gosh, because this pattern of this consciousness of a flavor, of a smell, is going back and creating the query for you. I was going to sleep the other day. I'm going to digress into this little visual I had when I was going to sleep. I was thinking of memories and sort of how that works. And I got this full-blown Gestalt epiphany of exactly what it looks like to send a query into the universe. It just absolutely showed up in my mind. And what you need to do is draw like a kind of like a flower petal, or a flower with 5 petals on it. And the center of the flower, where you would have the brown in a sunflower, is where the conduit is. It's sort of where the rod of the neuron is that goes to all the other neurons in the universe. And each petal of the 5 is the 5 senses. And the query is built based on stacking these things together. So if you're saying, look, I'm smelling iron and oil and I'm seeing red and whatever, you stack these things up on each other and then you send it down the wire, or you send it up the wire. And all it's doing is it's looking for a pattern match in your historical records of existence. Meaning it's going to go back up to usually your past, and it'll say, oh yeah, remember this? You were at your uncle's workshop, and he was spray painting that old 66 Oldsmobile red. You were smelling the paint, and you had the rust and the oil and the soot from this crazy garage, and it was 8 in the morning, so you had sort of that dewish summer smell. And as soon as the patterns lock, then it can send back the data package that goes right here, with perhaps a copy of what it bumped into that matched with all the other senses and all the other information. I thought I'd share that before I lost that. Now, for those of you who believe the universe could be a matrix, I think that maybe what we have done is we have created this sort of pseudo-illusion for ourselves that it's a computer. It's a matrix, but it's not a matrix built out of, Intel chips. It's not a matrix built out of some quantum computing thing, right? Which, 20, 30 years from now, that's going to sound hokey as hell. It's like someone bragging about radar in the 40s. But the matrix could be simply built out of what we recognize as consciousness. In one form of consciousness, it's hard and rigid. There are arms and legs. There is pain and pleasure. I'm sitting out here right now, and it's probably about 60 degrees. It's overcast. So today is a lot cooler than the video I made yesterday when it was about 75 and sunny. When I dream, I typically dream about the dark. Whatever I'm doing, it's dark. But I don't really consciously say, oh my gosh, I can't see what I'm doing. I never need a flashlight. It's somehow lit to an extent I don't get lost, or it's kind of dusky. And what's really strange is, at times throughout the year, because I'm always involved in crazy projects that require me to be awake for a long time, I do sleep during the day a fair number of weeks out of the year, consecutively. I just finished a 3D project where I was working for 2 weeks creating 3D art. And I was staying up till like 8 in the morning and then sleeping off the entire day, which sucked. And then I wake up in the dark, and then it's dark and it's cold. In California, that's not what we're living for here. But it's just what the job required, like constant work. But now think about me going on in other videos about ethereal particles, and gravity's a push, not a pull, and, which is, again, Faraday and Tesla and Dollard's theories. And perhaps all those particles, all those cloudy little things that make things exist in this particular universe are kept together through some consensus, as we've talked about several times, a consensus reality, right? And perhaps a larger consciousness that never sleeps, or sleeps on a much bigger cycle than us, right? We live pitiful little 80 to 100-year lives if we're healthy. But what if the consciousness that is holding this particular bubble of the universe together is on a trillion-year sleep cycle? So a lot can get done in one little moment of consciousness. And it's not looking for, payback or anything. It doesn't need to eat. It just is. And so it holds the whole thing together. So the matrix could be built out of layers and layers of consciousness. But perhaps the reason why we're getting tired, perhaps the answer to the question I've been seeking, is merely that it takes me personally, and you personally, and us personally, a tremendous amount of energy to perceive every blade of grass I can see, every leaf. I can probably see in my view rec right now, if I just do a pan like this, I'm probably looking at almost 1 million leaves. Little tiny leaves from the shrubbery, the palm trees, these couple of trees around me, the vines that are all over my backyard. I'm probably looking at nearly 1 million leaves. That's a lot of work. I'm looking at definitely millions of blades of grass and the leaves that have fallen on the grass here because we had a big windstorm a couple weeks ago. Every nuance of everything. I look down at the concrete that's underneath me here and all the little tiny specks that make up concrete. Clean concrete with some soot because it rained a few weeks ago. or a week ago. Think about the details that we notice as living beings. Well, no wonder we're tired. And that's before we get to our contextual reality, which is, I am a guy and I am X number of years old. I've got responsibilities. I have friends and I've got a child and I've got people in my life that are important to me that I take care of, and et cetera, et cetera. You have the same thing. I had an interesting thought the other day because, and I don't think I've ever mentioned this, which is good for this particular episode. Have you ever heard about these people who are anorexic or bulimic? And there's two kinds. There's folks that just need to be thin in their mind because they're in show business or whatever. And then there are folks that see themselves in the mirror as being heavy, as being fat. And they start starving themselves however they want to do it, either not eating at all or throwing everything up. And no matter how emaciated they get, no matter how their bones stick out of their chest cavity, right, their torsos are just concentration camp looking stuff, they still think they're fat. Their best friends, their lovers say, honey, you look great. You just need to put some more weight on. Eat a sandwich, right? But we say they see themselves as fat and we compartmentalize it to them. But we don't take that theory up into a deep thought, into a discussion. So let me throw this at you. Because this hit me yesterday and I thought, oh my God. Because that whole thing about someone being able to see themselves different is amazing. Now let me ask you this. It's where you're going to have your little epiphany. You ready for this? How many times in a moment of beautiful confidence and what some people might call vanity, you look at yourself in the mirror. You've done your hair, you put the right clothes on, there's nothing better than when your favorite clothes are clean, right? Your shirts are pressed, your dress is pressed, whatever. You got the right amount of sun on your face. It's good. There's no blemishes, any pimples today. You look in that mirror and you look amazing. And you're like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take a picture of myself. I want to remember this night that I look damn good. And sometimes you can take that picture and it turns out exactly like you thought it would. You look damn good. In fact, you put a little filter on your image and you look even extra better, right? But have you ever taken a picture of yourself when you thought you looked good and you look at the picture and you're like, oh my God, I look like shit. What's the deal? I look in the mirror. You're like, well, I right there, I look fantastic. And in my phone, I look like crap. And I'm not talking about the fact that cameras don't get the right lighting and sometimes, you don't have the right angle. Like you're looking at yourself in a particular angle and you're getting your face in a weird angle. So you're looking at geometry you don't normally see. And then you realize there's almost like two realities. It's like the camera doesn't lie, but it's like your brain is lying about how good you look because you're having a great moment. You feel so good inside that it's almost as if we can BS ourselves in the opposite direction that someone who views themselves as fat is doing. They're doing it in a negative way, but you're doing it in a positive way. But the camera's like, dude, I'm just looking at you. And it's almost as if your mind knows when you look in the mirror, that's you. I know that you're looking at a reflection of yourself. And so I'm aiding you in feeling good about the way you look. But you look in the camera on your phone, and for whatever reason, your mind's like, I know this isn't a reflection. This is a picture. These are pixels of you. And so there's no embellishment. And so you tend to go, ooh. And your relatives and your friends look at you in the picture. Okay. And they're like, yeah, that's the way you look. We love the way you look. What's up? Why are you freaking out over your image? And then it struck me. And this might be more of an exercise for the brain than a reality. But imagine this for 1 second. Imagine that we really don't have a body. It's only our imagination that makes it. I mean, you don't have a full body in your dreams, even though you'll imagine you have hands and you'll imagine that you're running. You don't really feel your thigh muscles pushing your body forward. You don't feel the pitter-patter of the bottom of your feet. You just don't. Pay attention next time you dream if you think you do. You won't feel your extremities. You're a consciousness kind of sphere emulating all of the constructs of what you think you are when you're in this particular reality, which is a lot more intense. It's the one that makes you tired. So imagine for a second that you and I, in this world, are exactly the same thing. Now, to make it easier on your brain, you could think of it as a generic mannequin. It's not necessarily feminine, it's not necessarily masculine. But we perceive ourselves somehow during the formation of the embryo into this reality, whatever that stage is, because we do have memories of being small. That's what's interesting. We start out small, and then we get bigger, and then we lock our height and our weight for a few years until we get older, and then we got to fight to keep our same size going. But what if your vision of yourself is projected to me from your brain? When I look at you, I am seeing the echo of what you view yourself to be, and you're seeing the echo of what I view myself to be. Now, that's not to address the mirror illusion, the mirror issue I just mentioned, where you see yourself better. There might be times when your brain creates a feedback loop to yourself, and it could be that you have a halo of affecting other people into thinking that you look better than you really look. Who knows? Depends on your exuding frequency, your electromagnetic field of distortion. I say electromagnetic as a metaphor and not as a literal reality. Now, let's take that one step further. Isn't it interesting that men seem to age a lot slower than women? Women age really quickly, and it doesn't matter if a woman's had a child or not. Women typically get wrinkles quicker. They just age quicker. Now, if a woman has a lot of babies, one thing you need to understand, and I think men need to understand this and be proud of it, and women need to understand this and be proud of it. If I'm completely wrong about this whole illusion thing, which I'm going to go to this next level on, a woman, is built to give life, right? A man contributes to the process, but he doesn't carry the child. A woman is giving all of her DNA and the husband's DNA to this child, and so her resources are strained, right? You give up some of your bones, some of your flesh, so you get osteoporosis more in females because they have given life. They've given a portion of themselves, and that might upset the apple cart balance of their own supply. There are the theories that if you were to abuse drugs, and this is the case, there's a lot of scientists out there that say that AIDS is really not a disease. It's just a classification of the diseases that you die from. Apparently, there's like 38 diseases that if you die from the disease exclusively, then you died of that particular disease. Let's say pneumonia. But if you die with pneumonia and you have this HIV positive thing, they call it AIDS. And it's because your immune system's given up. They're finding out that they discovered this in the mid-90s. There's 600 viral specialists that say that AIDS has been a complete sham on the people, and they make a completely convincing argument, and I don't mean maybe convincing, a completely convincing argument that says by the time you're tested for HIV, you don't have any harm or risk of dying of HIV. You've already developed the antibodies to HIV, and if a virus is going to kill you, it's going to kill you in 3 weeks. So if you're tested for HIV and you're positive, you are just carrying HIV. There's a giant percentage of folks that have been classified to die of AIDS that don't have any HIV, and that's impossible if the two are interlinked. There's not a single paper in the world that links HIV to AIDS, because AIDS is not a real disease. It's a classification of other conditions that you have when you die. But they're finding out that people who abuse drugs, who abuse their dopamine levels, and again, Parkinson's It's actually a dopamine deprivation. So you don't make enough dopamine, which is why you start shaking. And the drugs to treat Parkinson's is to give you more dopamine. So if you put that together, that'll help you a little bit. But there are, I'm just going to go on this little tangent here for a split second because it'll loop back. AZT is the number one thing that kills people who are diagnosed with HIV. So you get this harmless diagnosis according to these scientists of HIV. Then you get on one of the most deadly drugs in the world, which was actually banned back in the 60s when they invented it. It's basically it's like chemotherapy is what it is, but it kills everyone in like 2 years. If you take AZT, you'll be dead within 2 years, usually within the first year. So if you take AZT out of the equation and you just say I'm HIV positive, then maybe you give HIV to somebody, but they're not going to die of it. But there's a lot of abuse and drug use, which is why they say you catch AIDS from drug use. Nah, you just blew out your immune system with drug use. Homosexual males use something called poppets, I guess, and it's this little bottle, looks like an energy drink, and I guess they twist it off and smell it or something. It's like a whippet. But the active drug that makes them have the high is known for absolutely destroying your T cells. So all these guys having to do this because they're so satisfied with their choice in life, they end up dying of an immune system deficiency, which then gets classified into this AIDS bucket, right? But back to our dream theory, one of the other things that's a reality for the difference between male and female when it comes to self-perception, especially today, okay? And I think it's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, is that women are taught to worry about their looks. Even past the years of needing to get a mate to have their children. You know, you'll meet some women who've had X number of children and they're completely satisfied. And they may want it more, but, it's a toll on your body, right? So let's say a woman is constantly waking up looking for a wrinkle and worried about having wrinkles, right? I've heard wrinkles called stress lines, and it really has to do with that particular definition is if, your face is a sort of a record of the expressions that you make on your face over time. I used to work with this woman that would suck on her bottom lip, and she had the nutcracker marks from the side of her mouth down to the bottom of her jaw. And I'd sit there and watch her, and she would just suck the bottom of her lip during doing a company gathering. She'd sit there, and as soon as she got nervous, she started sucking on it. Little tiny girl. So she didn't have a lot of real estate because she's a smaller girl to counteract any of that stuff. I dated a girl for a long time that her whole family, on one side of her family, does this frown when they're surprised, like, oh my gosh, and they'll do this frown at the same exact time. And so she has carved just mountains out of her, from her nose to the side of her cheek, out of that expression. You'll notice that I have, the two little devil's horns between my eyebrows. Because, I'm doing this kind of intense thing because I'm intense, intense dude. See my episode on being intense from season 1. So we have muscle memory. It's like you're building up your biceps on your face. But over time, you start to stress your epidermis in a way that it starts to police all the new cells that come into life on your face. That's why people like Botox, because Botox cuts out all the ability to stress. But now imagine if we're in some sort of created reality, which we've talked about several times on different episodes. Maybe, just maybe, if we're imagining what we look like, and passing that pattern of perception that we have, self-perception we have to others, then maybe women are constructing age simply out of a psychological condition that's been forced on them by society that says you must be pretty forever because we sell makeup. We sell hairspray and hair products and dresses and jewelry. It's no mystery that women's clothing costs 2 to 3 times more than men, and it's made horribly. it's made frumpy. It falls apart quickly. You can't just wash it. You got to take it to dry cleaners, and you might get, if a guy's pair of jeans can be worn, 1,000 times before they have to throw it away, albeit we do wear clothes way longer than we should. A female equivalent, she might have 50 to 100 times she can wear her clothes before it's going to absolutely just shatter away. Men generally overall don't give a crap what they look like on average. We just do the bare minimum and then we go on with our life. And if you think about life before the sort of destruction of the family unit in the 70s by the Rockefellers, where women were, don't get pissed at me, but you were convinced that being in the rat race of a job was the way that you convince yourself that you're a good human being, which is such a crock. They were housewives, and they sat home and they thought about being all these things that men didn't have any time to think about, right? Because we were out earning the money, right? What any time? We got to earn that money so we can get, the best looking woman before we get the best one. And once you get her, you got to keep her. And then you want to keep your kids happy because they're cute little things and they deserve to laugh and have a good time at Disneyland, right? Nature's very interesting this way. The birds that are male birds, like the red robin is a male, but the female robin is like a brown bird. It's like a very generic bird. Because the overall genetic programming of a male is to procreate. And it is just driven in us. And it's not, there are genes in us and chemicals in us that create that spawning sensation. We must make children. But even after all the children are here, there's usually two realizations in a man. Now, let's say a guy is 50 years old. They'll still want to make kids, even though they don't want the burden of it. So they kind of say, well, okay, I'm going to have sex, but I'm not going to try to create a child. Not that I don't want it, but, I'm getting old and I want my kid to have a good young father. And so I've passed those years. If you have a child at 50, then your child's 20 when you're 70. And, Larry King doesn't give a fuck, but some folks, when you have a lot of money, you can do that. Donald Trump can do that indefinitely and make sure he has plenty of money put away for that kid to make up for not having the father around after he passes. But most of us don't. And we don't want to put our kid out into the world without a father, boy or girl, too soon. But they get on their feet. Plus, you want to enjoy your child's life. You want to see it. You don't want your child, graduating college and then you die. It's kind of shitty. I think it's interesting that when you meet people that are very sort of non-critical, they typically look pretty good. They're just bouncing around life. Life is so busy, they don't have a time to think about whether they look bad. But those who consistently criticize themselves, well, they're stressing themselves out. It could be just, forget everything I'm saying about this dream thing. It could just be a biological reality. If you're stressing over yourself, stress doesn't create young cells. Stress creates cancerous cells. So you got to chill out. Let those that love you for exactly who you are and not what you are. And I think, a good, I'm kind of off on a tangent here, but the good definition of a spouse, either way, is that they love you despite your age. Hopefully you're not, in some 30-year gap between your spouses. I'm not judging, but, if you're dating someone married to someone that's within a reasonable age of your age, you're kind of both going through the same thing. But if one of you seems to be, quote unquote, winning according to pop culture in the youth game, you got smoother skin than he does, smoother skin than she does. Hey, man, you should be looking into the soul, because that's the forever stuff, right? But back to our theme, what could it mean long term if this is a reality? I shouldn't use that word this time around. If this is true, that all reality is really the same thing, it's just we have a different flavor of it. This one's really intense. I mean, it is. It makes us exhausted. And again, you could on a scientific level, on a monetary level, say, well, dude, when you're in this reality, we have to pay bills. we could get hit by a car. And on the other reality, we don't have to do anything but exist and just have fun. Hopefully you're not having nightmares. And all I would say to that is maybe we have constructed bills in this reality. Maybe we have constructed pain in this reality. We've also constructed pleasure. What I think is interesting is that I've said in one of my episodes about dreams, probably dream realms, that I don't experience pain in my dreams, really. The only time I ever experience pain is when I am actually feeling pain in the outside universe and this particular hardcore reality, and it bleeds into my dream reality. Okay. But it's interesting how I felt pleasure in my dream reality, created by the dream reality. This isn't necessarily a popular thing to say in most YouTube channels, but you have the dream that's called the wet dream, right? It's where you actually have, as a boy, an orgasm in your dream and you wake up and something has occurred in the real world. I've had that happen to me one time in my entire lifetime, and I think I was about 7 or 8 years old. I think. But what was funny is that I was dreaming of a house that I used to live in when I was 5. And it really wasn't a sexual dream. It was interesting. I was in the utility room of my old house in Chanute, Kansas. And somehow I jumped up on the washer, and it had nothing to do with the cycle running. It wasn't running as far as I know. And there was a woman or girl or something that kind of grabbed me. And it was just instantaneous. I jumped on this thing. This person grabbed me, this girl. There was no real face to the person, so it really had no identity. It was like a dream friend. It was a very good dream friend, I guess. And it was like, bam, it happened. I woke up and I was like, oh my God, you're a little freaked out at first. And then you don't even know what to call it. And of course you find out later there's a cultural name for it. I've had a friend of mine who will remain completely obscured and nameless. He always said to me that he had them all the time. All the time. He's a really positive guy. And I think that was interesting. In the real world, he was extremely positive and always looking on the bright side, and he claimed to be having these constantly. I don't know if he was blowing smoke or whatever. I think he was telling me the truth, because he was sort of communicating to me that, are you having this too? Because I'm having this, and it's really strange, and it's actually embarrassing, and I have to watch out how I wake up, and et cetera, right? So I think it's interesting that there's a map between the two. My map is very exclusive. I feel pain from this world, this reality, this intense one, into my fantasy reality, which we call like the loose one, where you're resting, right? And I feel pleasure the opposite direction. And the only other maybe subtle kind of subatomic reality is that if I am very comfortable in this world in a really nice bed, you put your flannel sheets on in winter and the house is just the perfect temperature, I typically have really good dreams, and I feel extremely physically comfortable in my dreams, very warm, and it's just a really effortless existence. We're always talking about on this show that perhaps we control this reality. You're probably tired of me saying it over and over again. It would seem that this reality is one of convergence with other folks. The one big difference between this hardcore reality that makes us tired and the reality that is created in dreams that makes us feel rested is that you have access to other souls in this particular reality, or at least you believe so. And I think that the distinction and the proof of that is that, and again, there's no proof, okay? The idea that gives us this impression is that we have a friend. Let's say I've got a friend here, and I know them, and we talk. And then I say, see you later, I'll see you in 1 week. And then we leave, we live our life day to day, and then we have a bunch of dreams. Let's say we have 7 dreams for 7 days. They have the dreams, I have the dreams, and then we come back together and we compare notes about the dreams, and they were not in my dream, and I was not in their dream. In fact, we don't really recognize anyone in our dreams. They're always brand new people. But we seem to return back to this life exactly where we left it. If you didn't pay a bill, the bill's still not paid. If you bought a new car, the car's still in your driveway. But in that reality, where it's loosey-goosey, there's no... You might dream of the same sort of place, the sort of feeling, but it's all new when you dream. But when you come back here, you compare notes, and you think, well, this one must be real, and that one must be fake. Well, maybe one of the major distinctions about this particular reality is that you remember to bring it all back. You remember everything. There's never a point where you wake up and you go, where's my car? Oh, I drive this now? Holy shit, I thought I bought a Mercedes the other day. That's weird, right? But what if that's the only distinction that makes us feel like this one's real, that we literally have somehow the capability of memorizing everything that happens in this world? And then it goes back to that thing of, well, maybe there's only one consciousness in the entire universe. Then it goes back to my episode on, perhaps there is only one consciousness in the whole universe, and it's you. And you only think that you're with a bunch of people, but you're not. This channel is a very interesting litmus test for this theory because you're watching me through some electronic technique. I'm recording myself now, and I could publish this episode in a year, and you get to see what I said a year ago. It could be that this is a communal epicenter of multiple consciousness that work together to create this reality. And the reason why I can go to sleep and wake back up again, and it's generally real, it's generally the same way I left it, is because while I'm asleep, a bunch of other people are remembering the universe. And because one mind is infinitely powerful, all we need is one of us to be awake. But it would seem that if this theory has any meat to it, any legs to it, is that the dream world is a separate location. That's sort of this sandbox, this playground where you get to mess with everything, and you're sort of by yourself to do with what you want. You'll dream of your spouse and your kids in a dream. Crazy, wonderful experiences. I often will dream about my daughter and I at amusement parks. But if I called her up, I know that she doesn't have the same exact experience. She's not going to say, no, I did not see you last night on Space Mountain, and it so on and so forth. Think about the fact that we have this Mandela effect that we believe might be occurring. Big, giant pieces of society that remember things differently. Maybe that's a slip. I want to loop back on Mandela effect because there's no way I'm creating a second episode to make this point, so I got to throw it in here. We all have our favorite Mandela effect. For me, it's Eli Whitney being white. And for those of you who missed it, Eli Whitney, virtually every single person in the world I've ever talked to, which is probably a couple dozen, about Eli Whitney, who's the gentleman who invented the cotton gin. I remember him being taught to them in history class as a black man. And it was irony that a black man created a machine that got rid of the cotton picking industry for the slaves. Now there's a peanut guy too. But I have a family member that made an invention based on the cotton gin's mechanism. It wasn't a cotton piece of equipment at all, but it was taught to me. And it was literally I remember the day I was taught this, I think in third grade. And it was when I understood irony. But there's the one about Star Wars that for a long time, James Earl Jones remembers the line as Luke, I'm your father, and the line that we have today is no, I'm your father. And since I learned about the Mandela effect and learned about that particular one, and then watched the special of James Earl Jones saying Luke, I'm your father, and recounting when he first saw the line, and for 30 years he's been saying that, and there's videos of him at conferences saying it, Luke, I'm your father, and now it's no, I'm your father. What's interesting about it is I remember it as Luke, I'm your father. I've been in plenty of writing classes that we call it the Luke, I'm your father moment, which is if you can create that in a script where you make the audience reassess every fact they've ever learned in the script up to that point, you're an amazing writer. You've had a lucky, amazing moment, right? But the line preceding that line is something that I remember quite clearly as well, which is Luke saying, "He told me you killed him." When you preface this claim of Luke, I'm your father versus no, I'm your father with the line, "He told me you killed him," it has to be no, I am your father. Because to follow it up with, "He told me you killed him," with Luke, I'm your father, you could say it, but it doesn't make as much sense as saying it, "No, I'm your father." It's like, no, I didn't kill your father, I am your father. So that line makes complete sense to me. So I remember, I mean, you can see it I can see it in my head, just photo real of him hanging on to that platform he's on with his chopped off hand. And, he's got a big frown on his face and his teeth kind of look, woodchucky. And he said the line, "That's impossible." So we'll clean up that theory in my brain. But yeah, Eli Whitney being white, a white guy from Yale, it doesn't even make any sense to me. A guy from Yale, I guess, moved to the South and I guess observed plantation, cotton picking, and had this epiphany. You usually have epiphanies about mechanical things when you're deeply experienced in a particular art. And a guy who is picking cotton and watching how his hands are grappling cotton off of a branch, because it's not the easiest thing to do. I've had a cotton branch in my hand at once and tried to pull this stuff off, and it's not exactly the easiest thing. And so someone thought, okay, we'll create these wires that bang into the branches, and the branches will not be inclined to come off, but the sticky cotton, the fibrous cotton, will stick to these wires and it will be yanked off the branch. Makes complete sense to me, but not a guy who hasn't picked cotton for a very long time to see this. But I guess the dude in this reality must have gone down and watched a bunch of hands touch cotton and came up with this idea to speed up the process. Thank God. So one reality makes you tired and another reality makes you rest. One is extremely detailed and full of burden, and the other one, although you can have a frustration dream or a stress dream, as you might call it, that doesn't do you any good when you wake up, most of the time it's not like that. You only have periods of that kind of stuff. We tend to take stress from this world and work it out in the other world. It's very interesting because we have a compartment, whether or not this theory is right or wrong, doesn't matter. We still have a compartment, a quarantined area where you have dreams, and it's your area. I've had situations where, I'm worried about something and I will take it into my dream, and it's either realized in a way that the worry is legitimized, or it's completely vindicated out of existence. And I'm like, oh yeah, I just needed to see it from a different perspective. And now when I wake up, I don't have this worry anymore because I've had, more of a perspective by sort of working it out. But the other thing I want to leave you with before we close up this episode is that life, I think, and I've alluded to it in one other episode, if you can break down all of life into symbols of meaning, it will do an amazing job to your perception of reality, which is, when I career manage people from time to time, and it's always, what I always tell people is, don't worry about being a fireman or a doctor. Don't worry about anything, but come to grips with what you are as a human being. Are you a taker or are you a giver? That's the first question. And the second one is, do you like to help people or take advantage of people? Because that's usually the subset of those other two. One of the interesting things is when society gets privileged, like American society gets privileged, you'll have a bunch of people, and this has been a trend for 20, 30 years. Because I wanted to create things. I'm an engineer. No matter what it is, I want to engineer it. A drawing is an engineering process, If you mix in a lot of right brain in it, becomes creative and amazing. You write music. You're engineering a song. There's all kinds of credits about arrangement. Well, arrangement is engineering the tension and release loops, the voice leading of a piece of musical material, right? figuring out, well, the brain can handle this sound for a little while, and then I should probably give them a little break. Some victorious, major key crescendo, and then we'll go into a minor key for the break, and that pops back out. It's Red Hot Chili Peppers is really good to hear rock music that does this, where they'll have this really kind of minor key verses that go into this major key break, and then when the solo comes in, it's all this kind of cranky minor key stuff, and then boom, right back out through the chorus. It's all major key stuff, and you just feel that tension and release. It's beautiful, right? But symbols are amazing. Usually everything that we do is a symbol. And I'm going to give you some kind of extreme examples here, but a career has all kinds of symbols of accomplishment. But our intimate behaviors with each other are very interesting in that love is usually a sense of purpose in terms of you are protecting and you are giving. You are supplying what you're supposed to supply, especially from a man's perspective. A mother with a great maternal instinct. What is a maternal instinct? It is a symbol of giving. It's very, very simple. Remember, purpose is love and love is purpose, right? But think about the extremes. When I was a young kid, I had a really, really hard time understanding the concept of rape when I was a child, because again, when you're a child, you don't think about doing something horrific like that, right? And I remember asking my mom as a child, why do guys do this? You never hear it from a female to a male. I think that's probably because upper body strength, but females are a little bit more relaxed about that need to procreate, or just to have some, physical satisfaction. But my mom told me, she said, it's all about control. And that went over my head. I did not understand that for decades, because I was probably under 10 when I got that answer. And after watching, these prison shows and these crime shows, and, you get to crawl into the head of these guys that are answering questions about it all. It took me decades of hearing these guys' testimonies to finally go, oh, I get it. I don't understand you. I don't have that exact problem, but I get why, it's usually a guy that is a little awkward. With the case of Bill Cosby, it is the taboo of control. Taboo is another symbol of thought. You get into taboo things. It can be anything. Drinking water upside down is taboo, and so you do it, and you get the taboo symbol in your system. You create taboo symbols however you create taboo symbols, right? Kids are all into the taboo, not necessarily anything, really outrageous, but think about it. They want to symbolically defy their parents as soon as they start feeling this rite of passage, which is nothing more than their need to take control over their life, because they believe that they have at least enough knowledge from their parents, from society, from their own chewing up of facts and observing reality, that they can handle it all. And there's no need to surrender this control, because we all have that push to be free. And the rite of passage is the push to be free within a child, right? For Harvey Weinstein, it was most likely a push for, I can do things that other people can't do. And it's taboo symbol, and it's probably a little bit of the control symbol. But it's also some sick version of, I have money, and money gives me power. I can buy attorneys to get out of this problem, right? It's funny, it's lightly raining right now. It's really crazy. I'm in total sun. But I can see this tiny pitter-patter of rain coming down. Pretty funny. Well, when it comes to your dreams, those symbols are readily accessible. You can do whatever you want in your dreams, because you're not really hurting anyone, even though you're not really conscious of it unless you're having a lucid dream. As soon as I realize that I'm having a dream and I'm lucid, which doesn't happen very often, I immediately start flying, no matter where I am. And I won't necessarily fly really high up in the air. There's something about that that's sort of too spooky for me. It's, why fly 10,000 feet in the air because there's nothing up there, right? I'm going to be looking at clouds or something like that. It's usually flying around the group of people that I'm with, sort of thing. But to symbolically come back to the theory and then come back to the reality that is this thing that you're seeing me in, the idea is control. If you believe in the secret, like I've mentioned several times recently, and you believe in sort of this ability to pick the next second of your life, this might be at the heart of that mechanism to say, well, this reality is the one that makes me exhausted. The other one is the one that makes me feel rested. So all I need to do is start to loosen up my attitude towards this reality a little bit and understand that maybe because I respect the relationship of these two universes that I appear to live in, this yin and this yang, that I have a lot more control over this universe than I think I do. And because I don't think or I should say, because up until maybe this moment, you haven't believed that this is possible because there's no evidence, there's no clues that you could be doing this. You haven't been able to do it. Now, the one thing I always lean back on, and I said it once before, which is we do have mentally insane people in this world. And if there's any benefit we can get out of their existence, it would be that even if you are absolutely delusional, and you could actually pull into this group folks that are on really intense drugs that are making them believe that they are something different than they are. You know, there was a gentleman who played Superman back in the 50s in America, and apparently, it's reported two different ways. He committed suicide by jumping off of a building. According to my father's research, because he was a huge fan of this gentleman and a huge fan of the Superman franchise as a child in the 50s, he learned that the actor had developed a point where I guess he thought he could fly, or he thought that he could do this. And it's represented in the movie with, I think, Michael Keaton, which the name of the movie escapes me, but it's the one, it's like Birdman. It's Birdman, where he lives this dual life where he is this, it's sort of confusing in the movie, but he plays a superhero that's called Birdman on movies or television or something like that. And he ends up actually living both lives. And he flies around and does things when no one's looking. And then he tells his family members that he's doing this, and he got divorced, I think, because of it or something like that. But it's a very interesting thing to think that if our willpower is the only thing that keeps us in this reality, and if we're able to undo it with our imagination, then all of a sudden anything can happen. Then we look at people that are suffering from mental illness and we think, well, why aren't they flying? Why aren't they turning into whatever it is they believe they are? You know, it used to be this, schizophrenia is a very interesting reality, and it was in the movie Altered States with William Hurt. He has a line in there, of course someone else wrote the script who had a lot of research underneath their belt, that schizophrenia very often leads to the belief that they are Jesus Christ. And what's fascinating about that statement is you might assume that everyone who has that vision is Christian. And all they're doing is manifesting their fictional character into reality as a form of mental insanity, right? But we don't see them suddenly walk on water, turn water into wine. The TV series Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone is actually a scientific theory, which is the mezzanine between consciousnesses, between this reality and your dream reality. There's a mezzanine layer between the two, and Rod Serling was a genius to name a series that and say this is where you're sort of in this reality, but things go a little funky like a dream. That's why every single Twilight Zone has a brilliant twist at the end. The other reality is this. You will go to sleep next to your spouse at night, and you will be cutting logs next to your spouse. Your spouse can look over and you're asleep. And you might talk to yourself, you might shake your leg, and they're not seeing your body disappear. You're still here, at least as we remember when we wake up, right? If everyone else is just your memory and your imagination when you come back, then maybe even this is not true. But so far, we don't see people vanish out of existence. So if someone is in a mental institution and they're talking to themselves, having these conversations with beings in the room that no one else can see, there may be a mezzanine of your consciousness whereby you do maintain this body here. Maybe it's maintained by other people thinking about you. Maybe it's maintained by that global consciousness, which is the operating system. But your soul is out there floating around. Those that talk in their sleep, well, they have this little silver cord that goes back to the body and reports back in. And they don't quite sever the umbilical cord during sleep. And so their mouth kind of mimics what they're saying in their dream. It's like having a little, telephone back to your body. The interesting symbol of our existence in 2018 is that we're having sort of this renaissance of consciousness in mankind right now. And it's fueled by the internet, which has shrunk the world considerably, right? It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. We're hive mining more than we ever have in the past. And I think that those of you who are paying attention to social media platforms, because we have globalists losing this death grip they've had on us, just like Princess Leia talking to Tarkin and saying the more he squeezes, the more we slip out through his fingers. That's a beautiful metaphor for what's going on right now. So they're trying to sabotage their own platforms to make sure that the communication we have between each other is harder to acquire. There's what they call, shadow censoring, where they don't get rid of your videos or anything. They just make them not show up in any of the Google searches. You don't see them in your feed searches. Now, if you're a subscriber to this channel and you search on Moon Hoax, my video will probably pull up in your channel because you have gotten there early enough that you're linked to me. And so they try to make sure that you don't sense that there's any censorship going on. But someone who's never seen this show, they've never linked to it, they may have a really hard time finding this until they really, really type in the right words, or you refer it to somebody and they type in Deep Thoughts Radio and they find it. At that point, you're in the crowd, but they're like, hey, overall, we're keeping 99.9% of the population away from information. And again, it's hardly my show, it's the big epiphany, but, journalists that are amazing, journalists that really talk about current issues and are really pushing things forward. I'm all about expanding your brain, right, to think of things a little bit differently and to show you examples in the real world, such as the hoax of the moon mission, so that you realize, God, they do lie. Jesus Christ, do they lie? But while we have this opportunity, we can inject ideas into each other, and ideas are beautiful symbolic metaphors of reality that allow us to chain link other epiphanies together that would never have been linked together before. And let's say you hear me in 2018 and say by 2020, they've destroyed YouTube. And there's no other video service able to launch because it costs too much money to serve video over the internet. But you have this idea passed on by me, who was passed to me by somebody else. Maybe you made a comment in a video of mine and I made a video based on your comment. And so it's just this beautiful feedback loop. And feedback loops are interesting, right? When you hear someone talking to a hot mic, like Will Ferrell in his episode with it was Anna Gastower is her name. You talk and there's a little tiny reverb, and that goes from the mic into the speaker, out the speaker into the mic. And what happens with the feedback loop? It gets really crazy. It starts going whoop, and it starts squawking. And you have to put your hand over the mic to get it to stop, right? You guys didn't hear what I just said there, then. But the idea is that's what we're doing with our consciousness right now. And I want to make this point because I can make a whole episode on it, but the idea is people are waking up on a level that's amazing. Some people are waking up to the horrible globalist conspiracies, and some people are waking up like this show, which is just think more intensely, think more global in where we are as a person, as an individual, instead of thinking straight constantly, like you've got blinders on, you're able to turn left, like my buddy Sid Mead, and think 90 degrees to the left to see something that isn't there. One of the One of the first episodes of Doctor Who with Matt Smith was one of my favorite doctors up to this point, and I've seen every episode that I could get my hands on since 1963. He had a creature, and there's a Thin Man conspiracy out there as well that does this too, but there was this sort of sneaky creature in this apartment complex that you couldn't see by looking straight at it. You could only see it out of your peripheral vision. And I think that was a beautiful metaphor for waking up, is that you're able to see things in your peripheral vision, things that you typically ignore. You know, the frame rate of our peripheral vision is faster than the frame rate of looking straight. You also don't see 3D on your side because you don't have, the right eye can't give you an image on what you're seeing with your left eye and vice versa, so you can't create a stereo image. And the reason why the frame rate is faster in your peripheral vision than your straightforward vision is that when you have a predator coming up on your left, you need to know. And you need to turn your head and get the stereo depth of field to figure out, is that lion really far away? Is it right on me? Do I need to do something about this? Should I go run and hide? Etc. If you want to test this theory, I'll give you a cool little experiment I teach my students. If you got a ceiling fan in your house, lay on your bed, look up at the ceiling fan, look on it straight ahead, and you get that sort of blurry rotation thing that we draw with animation, right? The old propeller from like a Disney Steamboat Willie sort of thing. And then turn your head left or right to put those fan blades in your peripheral vision. All of a sudden, you'll see the blades turn smoothly because your frame rate's going up. It's very interesting. That's sort of what we're doing here with our consciousness. We're speeding up the frame rate, and we're also, well, what happens when you speed up your frame rate? Have any of you thought about the fact that slow motion cameras, even though I'm saying slow motion, the camera's not going slower. The camera's going faster. It's taking more frames than you typically get in your eye at 60 frames a second. And so when we play it back at 60 frames a second, those million frames of the bullet going through the Coke bottle, you can see it. You know, they filmed, photons going through a bottle. And you get to see light travel for the very first time in your life. It's cool. And that's sort of what we're doing on our conscious level, right? Anyway, I know you feel me. I love stuff like this because it can really profoundly affect how you think about reality from second to second. And it's not a negative. It's a positive, right? When you learn about all these negative conspiracy theories, you know, you kind of travel around with this sort of burning coal in your gut that's kind of like, geez, is this really reality, man? I can't even believe this. I got to deal with people who think that, you know, negative things happened when they really didn't because it was all a conspiracy, it was a manipulation, it was a fake massacre or whatever. It's kind of a bummer, right? You don't need those cancerous frequencies in your body. So what I'm trying to do with this show is give you very positive frequencies that you can chew up for your whole life. That's what I do. Me talking to you through this show allows me to feel like I'm sort of bringing people on board to think like this. And again, it's no conclusive thing. I'm not trying to convince you one thing is real or not, because, man, I'll let you know if I completely believe something or if I just am postulating this. But I want you guys to have subject matter that you can think about that's just really fun. And again, my theory of the universe is that if there's ever going to be a single human being that figures out something ultra profound about reality, I believe it's going to come out of the mouth of a child. Boy or girl, doesn't matter. They are going to just look at reality, and they're not going to have all these predispositions, all this constraint of thought that we give kids. Remember, when you're born, every day that you're alive, your mind is being closed. And it's these opportunities in society like this Renaissance 2.0 of consciousness that we start to undo these predispositions, these constraints on our mind to open it back up again, right? Every conspiracy theory that's out there that's ever happened to us as human beings has been based on the fact that some, you know, government agency manipulating the press is telling you that reality is this particular way. This guy attacked the World Trade Centers and da-da-da-da-da. And by having an open mind, and folks that have had this worked out, you know, I'm often referencing Hunter S. Thompson came out on the morning of 9/11 and said, follow the money and you'll find out who did this. Why did Hunter S. Thompson have that capability? Because he had seen some conspiracies in his lifetime. And even though he wasn't allowed to report on all of them, he still knew that this was bogus, and that being told by the press on the morning of exactly who did this, when your average homicide takes weeks and months and years to maybe solve, he knew something wasn't right. We need to be all Hunter S. Thompsons, right? We need to be able to see a hoax when we see it. Because in the end, you remove a lot of negativity out of your system, because you're being sold this, what do they call it? Is it the Galilean dialectic or whatever? It's the, probably saying that wrong, but it's the problem, reaction, solution that David Icke talks about a lot. You deserve to be free in your mind. You deserve to be in complete control of your mind. You don't need to be lied about global warming without the capacity to research it all. And so we're getting better. We're healing. We're absolutely healing as a society. And if I tell you a little story about dream reality versus this reality, and it gets you to get the symbol in your mind that things are not always as they seem, that reality is stranger than fiction, then you will approach everything that you're told and everything that you thought with that discerning mechanism in your mind, right? When people try to police the way that you think, and they say, no, this piece of World War II history is exactly this way. And you're like, you don't know that, right? The facts that you believe have largely been debunked scientifically. It's an impossibility, the things that you believe about World War II. And they're like, well, I don't want to have to go do research because effort bothers me. It makes me tired, right? And you get invigorated by seeking the truth. You like to get those negative frequencies of lies out of your system. And you want truth to be in there. That's why you have hunches about truth. Because you're told a line of crap and you're like, I don't know. I don't know exactly what the truth is, but that doesn't feel true, right? Why do religious people continually tell you that their Messiah is the one? Because they're nervous inside. Inside, they don't believe that it's true. And so the way that they fight that is through repetition. Like a criminal who did a crime, constantly saying they're innocent, trying to convince their insides that the lie is actually a positive frequency and it was actually true, that they didn't do the horrific thing that they did, but they did. And the reality of those sort of lies is that they never, ever, ever feel like truth. Ever. And with that, we'll end the show. If you dig the series, please go to deepthoughtsradio.com. Remember, there are other seasons out there, too. Some of the episodes in Season 1, I think, are some of my finest work, and some of them have under 200 views, which sort of is interesting. And I get a lot of viewers that will say, you should do an episode on this or that or this. And I'm like, well, have you seen the episode I did exactly on that? Oh, no, I haven't seen that. So one of the keys, if you can hear my voice, is that you must understand that the podcast has everything. So go to the website, deepthoughtsradio.com, click the RSS feed on your phone, and you'll get the podcast. If you're on Apple phones, there's a link to iTunes. If you're on Android, you can go straight to Google Play. But if you just click the RSS feed, it will find the podcast reader you got on your phone. You'll be set up. So definitely, if you dig one of the shows, look at the subject matter. If it's absolutely something you're going to hate, don't listen to it. If it's a curious title and you're not quite sure, give it 10 minutes and see if there isn't a twist at the beginning that will entice you to continue. Because I think that above all, it's not that you need to believe what I believe at all. It's that if I get you to contradict me with your own thoughts, and they're well-formed thoughts, and you've done your research, then I really want to hear from you contradicting me. I don't consider that a negative thing at all. Plenty of people in the comment section that don't agree with me, and I love it because you can change my mind. The stuff that I used to believe in episode 1 all the way to this episode right now, it's phenomenal. When I started the first episode on the fundamentals of the universe, I believe at the time I believed in the pull version of gravity, and now I no longer believe that. The other things that I believed in was like expanding Earth. But when I heard about flat Earth, for that brief moment when I was completely enticed by that theory and was really looking up at the sky going, oh my God, it could be a flat Earth, right? I hadn't cross-referenced it with my belief in expanding Earth. For those of you who are supporting me on Patreon, I want to say thank you. I am, just so that you guys know, I'm going to be posting some exclusive content in Patreon. The way that that's going to work is that I've probably recorded, I tried to do the math on it, I would say easily 30 hours worth of episodes that you've never heard because either they were crap or some part of the technical chain of events, the ecosystem between the computer or the camera failed. Usually it's the computer that failed. And so, but actually, I've actually recorded 30 minutes of an episode without turning on the camera, without realizing it shut itself off because I didn't actually turn it on. So I've got hours and hours and hours of episodes that I haven't redone that I'm going to start turning into audio-only access episodes, and I'm going to be linking them directly to the Patreon account, so those of you who are contributing can get a little extra bonus for your wonderful sacrifice. I appreciate that. So that's it. Please comment in the section down below if you got any good ideas or just some other epiphanies about what we're talking about. And I will see you in the next episodes. Take care of yourself and someone else. Over now.